Hey guys, so this is the last of my talks on a certain theme, and these talks are all based on stories that are found in this book, Zen Flesh Zen Bones by Paul Rebs. It's an old book. I've had it for decades now. That's long how long I've been doing this spirituality thing. Anyway, this is the third story that I picked out of these stories from this book, and all of them have to do with thievery. And I picked these because most of us think stealing is wrong. Um, Most people would agree with that statement. But what does it really mean to steal? How, even if it is wrong, um, how should we deal with it? And maybe it is a symptom rather than the an evidence of what we might call poor character, which I think is how it's usually interpreted. A bad person steals, a good person doesn't. Isn't that what most of us think? Maybe that's not really the case. So these are all stories, and if you haven't seen the other two videos, I really encourage you to go back and look at those. And these are all stories of Zen masters or people who are living with inquiry and Zen meditation in their lives, and how they have dealt with thievery, with stealing directly. Okay, so this one is called Right and Wrong, which is a perfect title. And again, these, I think, for me, are all lessons in forgiveness. They're all lessons in non-judgment. They're all lessons in compassion. So what we're seeing expressed here are those principles. Okay? So, right and wrong. When Benkai held his seclusion weeks of meditation, basically retreats, like a week-long retreat, pupils from many parts of Japan came to attend. During one of these gatherings, a pupil was caught stealing. The matter was reported to Bankai, and with the request that the culprit be expelled. Benkai ignored the case. Later, the pupil was caught in a similar act, and again, Benkai disregarded the matter. This angered the other pupils, who drew up a petition asking for the dismissal of the thief, stating that otherwise they would leave in a body. In other words, they'd all leave together if the thief wasn't cast out. When Benkai had read the petition, he called everyone before him. "You are wise brothers," he told them. "You know what is right and what is wrong. You may go somewhere else to study if you wish. But this poor brother does not even know right from wrong. Who will teach him if I do not? I'm going to keep him here even if all the rest of you leave." A torrent of tears cleansed the face of the brother who had stolen. All desire to steal had vanished. So, again, what is the right way to deal with thievery, with stealing, with any act of aggression, any act of subversion? Are we really dealing with somebody with poor character? Are we really dealing with a depraved person? Is punishment, this sort of eye for an eye, is this idea of justice, that somehow there's a scale somewhere out there in the universe that if someone takes something from me, until that person has somehow experienced a certain amount of pain, or they have something taken from them, that there's something wrong. There's a scale imbalance somewhere in the world. I think what we'll find in reality is there's no scale, and the scale is just up here. we think that, this idea that I have been wronged and now the person that wronged me must be made to pay in some way. There's a part of us that buys into that. And again, generally in spirituality, that part of us is called the ego. And what is the ego? The ego is this sense of a separate self, sense of separation. Again, if there really isn't a self and an other, then how can another wrong us? How can another do something that puts us in a bad way, right? If we're really all one. And in the Zen tradition, which is the tradition from which this story comes, this sense of oneness is expressed in a very nuanced way, which I like, because in yoga and the New Age, you often hear, I think there's even t-shirts with it where it says, we're all one. Yeah, well, that's convenient until someone steals from you, right? And if we're all one, then how do you steal from yourself? Okay, someone breaks in your house, takes all your possessions. Do you say we're all one at that point? So the Zen tradition says, not one, not two. And what that means is if you are living in a state of oneness consciousness, which I think some people have experienced that, where there's no differentiation between self and other. There are stories of yogis in India like that who they can't even feed themselves. They just have no sense of self. Well, the Zen tradition doesn't glorify that. That's not the goal. I think some people do glorify that. They think that that's oh, it's so great. He can't even feed himself. What a saint. He's so amazing. But that's not what is held up in the Zen tradition as ideal. Most of us are on the other end of that spectrum, where there really is no sense of oneness, of togetherness, of the fact that we aren't really separate, and that's really a fact. And so the ego tends to hide this fact from our awareness. And so again, this idea that someone took something from me and I'm going to punish them and make the scales right so I get back what's mine. The ego is a thing, if you can call it that. It's not really a thing. It's really a sort of like amorphous cloud of different thoughts and emotions. That's why it's so tricky to deal with in some respects. But the ego tends to take possession of things that really don't belong to it. That includes your body. That includes the thoughts that you call yours, your thoughts, your emotions. And that also includes your possessions. The truth is we really don't own anything. If you look in the natural world, there's no ownership. Sure, you can claim something as yours and you can defend it. You can kill others and say, I killed you because this is mine, but really isn't yours, is it? You die and it's still here. And so whose is it now? Is it still yours? How long is it yours? As long as you're alive? So the ego, again, it likes to think that it can possess things. My stuff, my couch, my wife, my child, my body, my thoughts, my emotions. And really that isn't the truth. And so again, this story is an example of someone who was caught stealing, and the way that the teacher, the Zen master, dealt with this is in a very compassionate way. And he basically said, look, if you know right and wrong, maybe you don't need to be here. You can study with anybody. But this guy needs help. And if I don't help him, who is going to help him? And this is a very beautiful thing as far as I'm concerned that this teacher did. And again, this is a different way. Is someone who steals, is that someone who is depraved? Or is that actually someone who maybe needs more love, more compassion, more understanding than your average person. So this teacher was basically saying, look, if you're average, if you already got all this figured out, maybe you don't need to be here as much as this guy does. So rather than punish him, rather than send him away, and think about what we do in our culture, right? Someone steals, what is that saying? What is that a symptom of? What is the right compassionate response to that? What is the awake response to that? Is that hitting them with a stick, putting them in prison for years? Has that shown any evidence of actually reforming people or helping people? What is our intention when we put someone in prison or we punish them? Is it that we feel compassion for them and we want to help them? What would drive you, again, to sink that low, that where you would steal? And this was in my last talk. I was saying, you know, a lot of us, we might say that we don't have we would never steal, but I think if we're honest with ourselves, and if you read a book like Malcolm Gladwell's Blank, in that book he makes it pretty clear that really this idea of the good person and the bad person, it's really an illusion. And most of us, if we're put in the right context, we can find ourselves doing very questionable things. So saying I'm a good person, I would never steal, is, as I said in the last video, it's almost a luxury to be able to say that. Anyway, I want to keep this short. It's a little over 10 minutes. But thank you for listening, and there'll be more talks to come. Namaste.